Vladimir Klitschko was a monolithic heavyweight champion for the majority of the, 8 or so years of his second title reign. There was obviously some of that title reign where he shared the glory with his brother Vitaly, who was also a world champion holding a WBC belt, while Vladimir had the rest. But for the majority of the time, it's been Vladimir as this monolithic champion. Very few of his opponents were even able to win more than a round or two against him, much less beat him. But now that Tyson Fury has come along and ended that reign, some people believe that Tyson Fury is going to be the same. Another monolithic heavyweight champion who goes on to rule over the division for years and years to come. I don't see that. And I tell you why. Because most of the time, when you have these monolithic champions who are ruling for a very, very long time and hardly ever get even a tough fight, not always, but in the majority of cases, they do so in a weak division. Vladimir Klitschko's reign has been a reign over a weak division. Mike Tyson, and this is going to upset some Tyson fans, but this is the truth. Mike Tyson's reign in the mid to late 80s, when he was champion before he lost to Douglas, was a reign over a relatively weak division. And this is when you get these monolithic champions. Again, there are some exceptions, but for the most part, that's how it is. And when I say monolithic, I don't just mean the fact that they're putting together an unbeaten run, but they're not even in competitive fights, really. Well, what we have now in this particular era, or the dawn of this new era, is a bunch of young heavyweights who are all big, or many of them are very big, can punch, many of them are athletic. So this is different than the contenders that were around for the majority of Vladimir Klitschko's reign. The majority of contenders that Vladimir Klitschko was fighting were much smaller than him, and the guys who were his size were nowhere near skillful enough or athletic enough to be able to compete with him. But now that Tyson Fury is the unified champion, you got Deontay Wilder, a guy who's nearly as tall as he is, a guy whose arms are nearly as long as his arms, a guy who probably punches harder, maybe not as skillful, maybe not as good defensively, but is more athletic. You got Anthony Joshua coming up. You got Dylan White. You got Joseph Parker. You got a number of heavyweights. You got Alexander Povetkin is still young enough. David Hayes there. He's about to come back. So I suspect that we might be about to enter another golden age of heavyweight boxing, where we don't necessarily have a monolithic champion who's just destroying everyone, but we kind of have a situation like we had in the 90s, where we had Holyfield Bowe, Lewis Tyson, David Tua, Shannon Briggs, Andrew Golota, all these kind of guys, Hasim Rahman, all these kind of guys, a lot of them fighting each other, beating each other, swapping victories and defeats, or maybe even like the 70s. Again, I'm not trying to say that these fighters are as great or not as great as the guys in the 70s, but I'm just talking about the situation. In the 70s, you had Muhammad Ali, who was past his prime at the time. You had Ken Norton, you had Joe Frazier, you had George Foreman, you had Ernie Shavers, you had a whole heap of heavyweight contenders who were fighting each other and all swapping wins and losses. Ali obviously lost to the likes of Frazier and Norton. Frazier and Norton were destroyed by Foreman. Ali came around and beat Foreman. So I think we're about to enter another era like that, where we're going to see all of these guys fighting each other in a round robin type situation, and no one is going to emerge from it undefeated. All these guys are going to lose. Fury's going to lose. Joshua's going to lose. White's going to lose. Parker's going to lose. Andy Ruiz is going to lose. Povetkin's going to lose again. All these guys are going to lose, and they're all going to fight each other and swap wins and losses. And that's going to be great for boxing in general. to have that type of situation. Now, some people are going to say, no, Hatman, you're being an idealist. That's not going to happen because all these guys are signed to different promoters and there's different TV companies and what have you. Well, that's obviously something you have to take into consideration because the world of media and the world of boxing promotion is definitely a lot different than it was in the 70s for sure. But it's not that much different than it was in the 90s. And in the 90s, eventually, the top guys did fight each other. Obviously, there was some delay because you had people like Lennox Lewis, who was on HBO, and he was promoted when he was in the States by Main Events. The Duva outfit promoted Lennox Lewis in the United States. And obviously, he had his British-based promoter, Panix Promotions, and he was managed by Frank Maloney. And then you had some of his rivals like Mike Tyson, who was on Showtime and with Don King. Holyfield for quite a while was with Don King in the latter stages of his career. So there was a lot of rivalry going on there, and it took a while to make certain fights. Tyson originally was supposed to fight Lewis instead of fighting, I believe it was instead of fighting Holyfield or Selden. I think it was instead of the Selden fight. One of the two. He was either supposed to fight Lewis instead of Selden or Holyfield, but Tyson opted to pay Lewis $3 or $4 million step aside money, so he wouldn't have to fight Lewis, and Lewis would, he could fight Selden or Holyfield instead, Tyson. But eventually the fight did happen, obviously. Too late, definitely, because Tyson was way past it. But the Holyfield fight at least did happen when Holyfield still had belts. Lewis had the WBC title, and it took place. And of course, Lewis fought a hell of a lot of the other contenders that were around at the time. A lot of the guys that they touted to be the next big thing, Lewis took them on. David Tua, Lewis took him on. He was a wrecking machine for a time in the heavyweight division. Obviously, Michael Grant was being talked up as the next American heavyweight champion when Lewis fought him. He was undefeated, and I know people laugh at Michael Grant now, but at the time, I'm telling you right now, again, I'm old enough to remember, at the time, Michael Grant was being taken very seriously, particularly by the American boxing press. They had high hopes for Michael Grant. Same with Shannon Briggs, another guy Lewis beat. A prime Shannon Briggs was one of the most athletically gifted heavyweights I've ever seen. Incredibly fast, explosive. He would come out of the blocks at 110 miles an hour, Shannon Briggs, when he was in his prime. And he was being talked up as like a heavyweight version of Roy Jones. I'm not making this up. This is what the American boxing press was saying about him while he was still undefeated. Obviously, he ended up losing to Darrell Wilson, another young up-and-coming heavyweight. And once he lost to Darrell Wilson, the very same press who'd been calling him the heavyweight version of Roy Jones and praising him and all this type of stuff, they totally turned on him and started sticking the knives in him. But it is what it is. Anyway, I'm digressing here. My main point is, despite the fact that there was promotional differences and whatnot in the 90s during the Holyfield, Lewis, Tyson, Riddick Bowe era, and obviously we never got Lewis against Riddick Bowe because Riddick Bowe avoided that fight, but we still got a hell of a lot of good competitive matchups in the 90s. A hell of a lot. And obviously at the end of the Lewis era, we got Lennox Lewis against Vitaly Klitschko. So, yeah, I suspect that this era we're about to go into is going to be similar to that. You know, Lewis himself, he had a little title run when he was at the top, but he wasn't a monolithic champion. He wasn't like the way Vladimir was, where every fight he went into, you felt like it's not even going to be competitive. No, it wasn't like that at all. There were a lot of people actually who picked David Tua to beat Lennox Lewis. A lot of people picked David Tua to beat Lewis. Lewis also fought Henry Akinwande, another big, tall, 6'7" type guy. So the fights, and you know, many of Lewis's fights were highly competitive. He wasn't just blasting everyone out. I mean, there were blast outs like the Golota fight, but there were highly competitive fights as well. You know, the Briggs fight was competitive. Ray Mercer fight, even though I don't think he wasn't champion then, actually. But anyway, yeah, and you same for all of them. Holyfield and Tyson obviously had their 2 fights with the controversy. Holyfield had those amazing fights with Riddick Bowe. That was a great rivalry there. And you had all these great fights and all these special performances, because you had a whole heap of heavyweights who were similar in ability. I'm not saying they were all equal in ability, but they were all similar in ability. They had a big Royal Rumble round robin type situation where they all gave each other losses. So yeah, I think we might be about to enter that again. And one of the reasons why I'm optimistic that we will see fights between the likes of Joshua and Fury and Parker and all these kind of people, Deontay Wilder. One of the reasons I'm optimistic is because none of these guys at the moment are big international stars. Not yet. And in order to become big international stars, they're going to have to actually be in serious fights, competitive fights, to get their stock up to the level where they're on a, you know, on a similar plane as, well, like Klitschko was, or similar plane to Manny Pacquiao or Floyd Mayweather or some of the heavyweights of old, the Mike Tysons and Holyfields and Lennox Lewises. They're actually going to have to, at some point, get in the ring and swap leather with their compadres. They're going to have to do it with their peers. And once they've done that, maybe then you might start seeing some people avoiding this and avoiding that and trying to stay in their own lane and not really fight anyone. But it's still going to be difficult because you got a mandatory situation. If you're a champion, if you're a belt holder, you got to fight your mandatories. So somehow, some way, I really do get the feeling that it's going to be a wild time in the heavyweight division over the next few years. And we're going to see the titles changing hands frequently. I mean, already the IBF are talking about maybe stripping Tyson Fury of their title, because he wants to, well, he has to fight a rematch of Vladimir Klitschko, because Vladimir has decided to exercise the rematch clause in the contract. And, you know, the IBF want Fury to fight his mandatory, which is Vyacheslav Glasgow next. So there's a contradiction there. It kind of reminds me actually of after Lewis beat Holyfield, I think it was it the WBA? They wanted him to fight Ruiz, and Lewis wanted to go off and fight someone else, or was it Michael Grant or Toure he was going to fight? I can't remember now. But still, yeah, I think it was Grant. Yeah, Lewis fought Grant because Grant was the big name in American boxing, the big young up-and-coming heavyweight who they all thought was going to beat Lewis and whatnot. So Lewis opted to fight him instead of fighting Ruiz, and they stripped Lewis of the WBA strap. And this kind of reminds me of us. It's similar, although in this case Tyson Fury is being forced because of the rematch clause. He'll be forced to fight Vladimir Klitschko. It's not really his choice, so he's going to get stripped by the IBF. Seemingly, it looks like at the moment, unless they're going to grant him an exemption. I don't know. And that will obviously free up the IBF title for someone else. Who would fight for the vacant IBF? I'm guessing Glasgow against the next available contender. I ain't looked at the IBF rankings lately. So maybe one of you guys can do that and find out who it would be if they do strip him. So, yeah, it's going to be, I think, a crazy and wild time for the heavyweight division over the next few years. And all these guys are going to end up losing. All these guys are going to be involved in serious fights, dramatic fights. And I'm looking forward to it. I can't wait. I can't wait. This is what the heavyweight division needs. And as far as Vladimir Klitschko's rematch with Tyson Fury, it's Tyson Fury's fight to lose. That's how I feel. I saw an interview with Peter Fury talking about the possible venue for the fight, the possible location for the fight. And he said that in the contract, there is no stipulation that a rematch would have to be in Germany. So, and according to him, they're going to have a lot more say in the terms of the rematch than they did for the first fight. They say they got a pretty good deal for the rematch. So it could end up being in the UK, you know, and I'm sure there won't be any spongy canvas or glove problems or anything else like that in the rematch. So Fury should be a lot more comfortable going in there. And as I say, as long as he respects Vladimir's power. I was a little bit concerned after the fight when Fury was saying that, oh, Vladimir didn't even hit that hard and this, that and the other, because I really don't think Vladimir caught him with full power. I don't think Vladimir was committing to his punches the way that he normally does, because he was afraid of Fury and he was in a an uncomfortable situation. He didn't feel confident enough to really let go with the power that we've seen him let go with shots before. So I hope that Tyson Fury don't get lulled into a false sense of security thinking that Vladimir somehow can't hurt him. I hope he don't do that. That's all I'm saying. Because if he does, and if he gets complacent, then Vladimir might be able to beat him in a rematch. But if he boxes the same as he did in the first fight, the same basic game plan, keeping it long, sticking and moving, forcing Vladimir to come to him, as long as he does that, I see him winning easier next time. Vladimir might try and be more aggressive. And if he does, he'll give himself a chance. He definitely will give himself a chance because that guy's got serious power in both hands. But can Vladimir really manifest the courage that he's lacked for most of his boxing career in this rematch in the way that he fights it? I don't know. I wouldn't put any money on it, put it that way. And if he does get more aggressive with Tyson Fury and try to take him to war, he's obviously going to leave himself open. Tyson Fury is experienced in wars. He's been in the trenches before and he's come out on top. That's not something that Vladimir Klitschko can say. Yeah, he was dropped a couple times by Sam Peter by glancing punches and he decided to take a knee, but he never went to war with Sam Peter. You know, Tyson Fury's been to war. He's been in fights where he's stood toe to toe trading shots. He's proven he knows that he can come out of that situation and come out on top. So he's got that type of inner confidence. And obviously from the first victory over Klitschko, he knows that all he has to do is stick and move and he can outbox this guy. So Fury will be the one going into the rematch with a lot more confidence. And yeah, I think it's his fight to lose. As long as he stays disciplined and respects Klitschko's power, I see him winning again. And we'll see what Klitschko can do. Maybe he can rebound and prove that he does actually have some fighting heart. Maybe he can muster up that one brave performance. We saw Buster Douglas do it. We saw Victor Ortiz do it once in their careers respectively. So maybe Klitschko can do it. We'll see. Anyway, let me not long this video out. This is how I feel about the heavyweight division. I think it's going to start getting very interesting. I don't think there'll be a monolithic champion. I think we're going to get a round robin Royal Rumble type heavyweight situation where all these guys are swapping wins and losses, and we might even end up seeing some heavyweight classics. We'll see how it goes. Drop your comments in the comment section below and let me know how you feel about everything I've mentioned and brought up and talked about in this video. All right? It's Hatman. I'm out.